So, sports media, there is a lot to discuss, there is a lot going on. Pablo Torre has kind of resurrected the medium. It was a medium that I got into the industry to try to be a part of. Part of my goal growing up was to be a reporter, journalist, writer, whatever way you want to constitute it. And as I went to college and got out on my own, I learned very quickly that not only was the media game a cutthroat game, but it's a game that doesn't pay very well. And I think a lot of folk like me realized, like, hey, maybe this isn't the game that I thought it was. Maybe it's not that necessarily that it was glamorous, but in the sense of, well, if these dudes ain't making no money, why are they doing it? Yeah, you get the perks of traveling with teams and covering teams and interviewing athletes and just having that unprecedented access that fans clamor for. But if you're not getting a reasonable living on the back end, then what are you doing it for? I know for me, it was about for the love of, just having that access and being a part of the story and being able to, learn more about players. That's where it started for me. Being a part of the news, the last era of newspaper readers growing up, to where everything now is straight digital, straight on your phones. It was a thing for me to be a part of where I really wanted to know more about athletes. I wanted to know more about why things were happening the way that they were. But now it's come to the point where what information are we getting in today's age? Where are you going for information? Let me know down in the chat, and I see we got some folks pulling up in the chat, and I appreciate them. Where are you going for your information in regards to sports? Because outside of a tweet, outside of a podcast, where are you going? Because, the four-letter network isn't doing what it used to do back in the day when it comes to journalism. That is apparent. They are personality-driven, not news reporting-driven anymore. I don't know if there's any other company that's on that same type of time in terms of journalism first, entertainment second. I think the whole game, the whole energy has shifted towards, we want dudes who get clicks. We want personalities that get clicks, and we'll worry about the news portion later. And I think that's a misstep. Let's hit the chat real quick. I got some questions. Well, I'm here. Fire away. What I think is dying about this industry is the fact that no one cares about the news. I think by and large, we have shifted away from news and we have turned more into just caring about the gossip. And while gossip and tea has its place, we also want the news. Like the fact that Pablo Torre is being championed, and it's not his fault, it's just the state of the game. The fact that Pablo Torre is being championed for unearthing a Clippers story about the whole Kawhi Leonard circumventing the salary cap, and Ballmer was running for his life, lying on television, and Lawrence Frank was doing the same. I don't think that story is as crazy as they made it seem out to be. But because there's such a lack of sports media and the sports media reporting, that story became crazy. Back in the day, that story would have just been a story for a day or two. And then we would have moved on to the next investigative journalism piece. Whereas with the Pablo Torre story about the Clippers, it became worldwide. It became international. It became a real big story that was being hunted down and chased down because it was like, oh, finally, there's something going on besides who doesn't like who in the locker room. It's become transactional. What team is going after what player? What player on a podcast is giving you this story? What reporter on a podcast is giving you this story? It became to no, I actually, with Pablo Torre in that case, he hunted information down for 7 months. 7 months he hunted down information on Kawhi and the Clippers and Ballmer and his involvement. How many other podcasters, tweeters, wherever you're getting your information from, how many of those are going to dedicate 7 months of their time to one story? You're not going to get that in today's ADD society. Everything now is about fast, turn it over. And the sports media landscape has tried to adjust and evolve with that. You know the old adage, adopt or die. And I think that's unfortunately where the game is, where everyone's just trying to keep up with who's going viral, who's putting a lot of clicks out. That information takes too much time. Just say the thing, get your opinion out. Opinion has trumped news. And I think that's hella problematic, and that's why the media, the sports media landscape is dying. And to be quite honest, I think it's dead. I don't think it's dying. I think it's dead. But for those that I know that are still in the industry and still trying to collect a check from this industry, I'm trying to have some kind of, optimism. But to me, sports media, as I have known it and as you have probably known it, is dead. When opinions trump news, we're in trouble. Because the Kawhi Leonard story shouldn't have been that crazy. We're consumed by this, the Michigan story with Coach Moore. And that's going to be a thing because it's gossipy. That story is going to have way more legs than the Kawhi Leonard story. If Pablo Torre's not dropping something on Kawhi Leonard, no one else is, because no one else is going to jump in on the deep end to unearth all the stuff that's going to be necessary to bring everything to light for that story. But there's more story from Michigan. Oh, we got tea for that for days because it's salacious. It's gossipy. That story is going to have legs. And that, to me, is where sports media has gone wrong, because that story should be the one that is only for a couple of days and then you move on, because it has nothing to do with sports. It's everything to do with the gossip. You think Moore's the first coach to smash an assistant? Coach Orgeron at LSU. Do we need to revisit that? Now he's running around doing podcasts and he's being rehabilitated off rip after only a couple of years of the scandal that he went through. So clearly this stuff doesn't really matter in the grand scheme. So if that's the case, then why are we putting so much attention on it? Well, it's the flavor of the moment. It's the news of the moment. And I think, to me, that's why the sports media thing is a wrap. Shout out to the homie Steph in the chat. Journalism went from being accurate and quick to just being quick. Who do you think kicked off the era of, who do I think kicked it off in terms of the ending of it? I mean, it's easy to go to First Take, right? But I also think we got to go to sports radio. I think sports radio did a really strong detriment towards the end of journalism within sports media. Because if you're talking about where did it go wrong, where did it go left, where did it change to where we went from news matters first to now opinions matter first, or have a take. Like, shout out to Jim Rome, who worked on his television show for a long time, and his whole thing was have a take, don't suck. So it's not even about, are you delivering a useful opinion that might have news in it? It was just straight up, have a take, don't suck. Like, you can have an opinion, but don't have a sucky opinion. So it doesn't even really matter if your opinion is fact-based or not. Just, is it entertaining enough? Is it engaging enough? And I think that mentality is what got us here to where we're at today. Sports media, sports radio specifically, and all of that comes with that, has changed how we view things, has changed how we look at the landscape, because it's no longer about, is your information based off facts? Is based off of, is your opinion funny? Is your opinion rage baiting? Is your opinion engaging, period? Like, what is it? Is your opinion going to drive other opinions? Are you going to say the thing? Like, you can see with these sports debate shows. Are you going to say the thing that's going to get the clicks on social media and have the comment section lit? Is that what you're going to do? And you see Colin Cowherd, he takes every single side until the masses, y'all, decide which take is the, really engaging take, and then he doubles down on that particular take. But he's going to give you all the sides of the story until y'all dictate with your views, with your hearts, with your clicks, with your retweets, with your shares, which take is going to be the take he knows to double down on, because it doesn't matter. I remember going to a sports conference and a sports media conference in LA not that long ago, right after the pandemic. Not that long after the pandemic, and Colin Cowherd was a speaker at this conference, and he basically said, I talk about football all year round because the numbers dictate that. So whether there's a crazy story going on in baseball, whether there's a crazy engaging story or a heartwarming story that's going on in NHL or any other sport outside of the big four in this country, I'm going to talk about football more than that. It could be the craziest story going on in baseball. I'm going to still lead with football if there's a transactional story that he thinks the audience cares more about. Like, that's the game. Like, they're being incentivized to do so. The numbers and the money in these contracts to start your own companies and leverage that and et cetera, all that stuff is benefited off of that. All of that is bereft from that. Hit the chat. People forgot about that Coach O situation. Yeah, bruh. Like, yo, that's for real. That's for real. That Coach O, he got away with it. He got away with it, and it just kind of came and went, and now he's back out there. He was throwing shots at Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin, who has an under 500 record against teams in the top 25 for his whole career, who is not that great of a coach. He's more of a CEO coach. He's not really into X's and O's, and he has shown that at other stops by flaming out. But he's more of a personality guy. And the fact that that story came and went, he demanded all this stuff, and it was hot for a couple of minutes. But then there was no real reporting behind it because Lane Kiffin was controlling the narrative. He was controlling everything behind the scenes in that. And I think that's, again, if you want to say where it started, to me, it started with sports radio. The growth of sports radio, where you had a lot of talking heads that had to fill airtime. You know, I worked at the number one sports radio station, well, at one point in time, the number one sports radio station in the country, WFAN, in New York City. That's where I grew from an intern, worked my way up to being a producer there. That place birthed Mike and the Mad Dog, all these types of personalities. Boomer Esiason's whole second career was based off of, you know, being a morning drive radio talk show host. Craig Carton, who was arrested by the feds, still keeps getting checked because he's popular on sports radio. So sports radio, if you have an opinion and you can curate an audience and curry favor with that audience and build a loyal fan base, you can do no wrong. You can even get arrested by the feds and still get your job back. Hit the chat. Sports is entertainment. It doesn't need quote jockeys. And sure, right? Like, no one wants boring. I'm not saying all we want is news. I'm saying there used to be a balance. And even if you want to say it was skewed more towards news than entertainment back in the day, I'll even give you that. If you want to tell me it was 70-30 news versus opinions back in the day, because having an opinion and having an opinion being broadcast, that was an honor. That was a privilege. That was not a birthright. Like, you had to earn the right to be a columnist, is what they used to be called. You used to be a columnist. If you were a columnist, not only did you graduate from being a reporter, whether it's a beat reporter or just an overall sports reporter, you graduated to being, no, people care about your opinion, but you had to earn that. So while it was 70%, you got news. Why did that team win? What happened in the game last night? Who's the next team they're going to play? Et cetera, et cetera. Then you would have a little bit off to the side of, hey, I think the coach might be bugging. Hey, this player's not living up to their potential. Like, that was the anecdote. So 75-25, 70-30, however you want to slice it, that's what it was. You would get 3, 4, 5 stories on the game and what happened in the game from many different angles of the game. And then off to the side, you would have someone giving their opinion on the overall landscape of what the team is doing. It's been completely flipped the other way now, to where you might have one story on the actual game and 3 or 4 stories about opinions. That's where we went wrong. That's where the industry went wrong. So while I agree, we don't just need 100-0 or even 95-5 or 90-10 news to opinions. I'm not saying let's gatekeep opinions. One thing I've always been a champion of, there should be more voices. I champion that all the time on all my platforms. More voices should be heard. However, there used to be a level of understanding between what's going to be viewed as just opinion and put in a proper lane of, hey, this is just somebody just talking, as opposed to, hey, this person was at the game and they're telling you what they saw. They talk to players, they talk to coaches, they talk to assistants, they talk to scouts, and this is what they heard. Now those two things have been mixed together to where someone on the internet who has an opinion can be put on the same level as someone that was in the locker room of a game last night. That's the problem. Thoughts on college football in totality? Man, that's a loaded question. I think in general where where college has gone, and you can even put this in the landscape of sports media. The four-letter network, ESPN, has a show that is catered around college football. And the college football rankings and the college football playoff has become a thing amongst itself. We are witnessing the death of bowls. So we're now in a spot where bowls used to matter. Even though there was too many of them, we got to the point where certain bowls mattered or all bowls mattered, right? Just like we went from all lives matter to, all right, that's another stream for another day. So we went from all bowls mattered to then we need more bowls. And then bowls expanded. And then it got to be there's too many bowls. And then it was like, well, we need a playoff. Then they tried it with the BCS computers. It was too much. It didn't work. It was janky. All right, let's remix that. Let's figure out a better way to go about it. Then they figured out and they landed on this college football playoff. But then as the money keeps coming in with college football, and as the power 4 or 5, however you want to dictate it, as a power 4 or 5 actually realize, hey, we're really the ones only making this money. If we really want to get down to it, it's really just a power 1 or a one in a possible, depending on how you feel about the Big Ten. But it really just comes down to the money is starting to dry up, and the sponsorship money is starting to dry up because the ratings for these bowl games that aren't the big bowl games or the noteworthy bowl games isn't justifying the price tag that's being put in front of them. So if the money's not matching up, if the money is now funny with some of these random bowl games and teams are pulling out, Notre Dame saying they don't even want to be in a bowl game because they feel they got screwed in the college football playoff. And then now the narratives you see coming around it where there's actual reporting that Marcus Freeman's flirting with the Giants, or maybe the Giants are flirting hard with Marcus Freeman. And now, as opposed to last year where Marcus Freeman couldn't really devote the time to consider the Giants or consider any other team for that matter, because Notre Dame was making their way through the college football playoff all the way to the national championship game. Now that they're out, and he no longer has to deal with not even a bowl game because they pulled all the way out. They're not even going to go to a charity case game where they could go kill somebody and feel good about themselves as heading into the offseason. He's got all the time in the world now. So if he wants to investigate and maybe listen to the Giants, who are still flirting very hard, if he wants to listen to other teams who currently have coaches that might be in playoff contention right now, if he still wants to listen to those teams on the side, he's got all the time in the world. And the landscape has shifted where Notre Dame, who's in the ACC conference for every sport except football, because football is where their real money is at, they now are in a position where next year they're guaranteed to make the playoff. They're guaranteed to make the playoff without even playing. Like, top 12, they're in. If Notre Dame is ranked in the top 12 next year, they're guaranteed to get in. Why wasn't that reported? And this comes to be the whole point. Like, that little piece of information should not be dropping now. Because how is it that a school gets to dictate, hey, if we're top 12, you're putting us in the playoff? Where was that news? Why wasn't that reported? The fact that Notre Dame could be mid next year and have 3-4 losses, but if they somehow magically land in the top 12, which is possible, I mean, Bama's been able to, all right, let me not. If they find a way to be in contention for the 12th spot, they are guaranteed to make the playoffs. regardless of whether you have another James Madison or anything like that, Notre Dame's getting in. Why was that not reported? Which goes to the overall thing of what has happened to sports journalism, what has happened to sports media. If this was 25 years ago and Notre Dame found a way to write into a contract that they have an automatic in regardless of conference championship, regardless of where they are in the CFP rankings week to week, that would have been reported on. That would have been a story. That would have been a pipe bomb that would have been dropped. Steph in the chat. NCAA should have been abolished as an organization years ago. Now, that's big facts. I mean, the NCAA, outside of FIFA and the UFC, I would say the NCAA, like those are the big three when it comes to the most corrupt organizations that involve sports. FIFA, UFC, and the NCAA. But I think, Steph, to your point, I think the NCAA is quietly being abolished because they tried it a few years ago when they wanted the super conference, right? Like the Super League, like how they try to do in soccer. They were trying to get all the conferences, all the leagues to combine into one and just do a round robin that way and box everybody else out. Clearly, the NCAA is like trying to still assert their power. They're still trying to establish that they have power, but they don't. Like if the SEC decides, if the SEC and the Big Ten decide, yo, it's just us, and you either get down or lay down if you want any of this bread, and they decide to take all the media dollars with them, it's a wrap. It's completely a wrap. I mean, if you're looking at where the NIL game has taken the allure of college sports, it's already happening in front of our faces. Like, there's no reason for USC to be in the Big Ten. Absolutely not. But if the whole goal is let's get all the notable schools from all the big markets into 1 to 2 conferences, and then at some point in the future, we mold everything into one giant-ass conference, and then that becomes the actual conference of them all. From a Power 5, Power 4 to now a Power 1, that's where it's going. And the NCAA can't do anything about that. I mean, the NCAA, they have caved so much over these last 4 or 5 years. Like the way that NIL has exploded, the way that the transfer portal has opened the floodgates of everything, I think the NCAA low-key is like a dead org walking. They're a dead conference, a dead organization walking right now. It just hasn't happened yet. It's kind of like radio. It's kind of like sports radio. It's kind of like sports media. Like, it's dead. It just doesn't know it's dead. It's on life support. Corey, how did they get that off? How do you think they got that off? If you are Notre Dame and you have the leverage of being one of those, you are Alabama, you are Michigan, you are Ohio State, and you are not with a conference, which means you are exempt from some of the shenanigans that could go on with conference championships and all that type of stuff. Although not being in the conference actually hurt Notre Dame this year. This is one of the rare years where not being in the conference actually hurt them, because it was widely known leading into the ACC championship that there's no way for Notre Dame to make the playoff. There was no way, regardless of the outcome of the ACC championship game. If you would have watched the rankings and how they were being scored, there was no logical way for Notre Dame to make the college football playoff with not being affiliated with a conference. The ACC champion was going to make it, and that was going to cause a domino effect because they got to have Alabama in there. So you're not going to move Alabama up or down. Alabama stays right where they were supposed to be at. Notre Dame got that deal because if you want Notre Dame to participate in anything in football, you have to bow down. They know what type of brand they are. They know what type of notoriety they have. They know what type of bread they bring to the table. If you want them to participate, you're going to have to acquiesce to what Notre Dame wants, and that's where they're at. And that's how they got that off. Like, they have the leverage. And that's why they're staying independent. Staying independent when you have that type of level of status is huge. Because Notre Dame could at some point say, yo, SEC, what's up? Can you imagine the type of share they would get from the SEC bread? Who do you think is going to get more share of SEC bread if Notre Dame decides to join the SEC? Vandy or Notre Dame? Mizzou or Notre Dame? If Notre Dame decides, all right, we're ready to get down, what do you think is going to happen? Like the scope of what we're talking about in terms of the financials, it's all big bank take little bank. It is big conference take little conference. And that's how Notre Dame's able to get away with it, because they'll be able to stay exempt but still keep their status, still keep the bread coming in. And that's why they're able to leverage it to where this is a thing now to where if and when the day comes, I think there will come a day where there's a super conference. When that day comes, Notre Dame ain't going to take no shorts. Notre Dame waited this long as an independent and finally gets to cash in those chips, and they're going to take a short? No, they're not going to take a short. They're going to get their bread. Steph in the chat, Notre Dame also lost to Miami, and Miami was on the outside looking in. Yeah, and that goes to, again, a narrative that was being built every week heading into the last week of the college football playoff. The committee kept dodging head-to-head when it came specifically to Notre Dame and Miami. When it came down to Notre Dame and Miami, they didn't want to talk about head-to-head. They want to talk about strength of schedule, all that type of shit. But prior to that, when any other scenario, we heard a lot about head-to-head. And they were ducking the smoke of head-to-head because Miami beat Notre Dame. So you can't have Notre Dame in there when they're so close to Miami in every scenario. So we put it where we can't keep Miami out. There's no scenario that we can paint where we could keep Miami out, even though you could leverage some losses that Miami had outside of beating Notre Dame. But once it comes down to it's either Miami or Notre Dame for technically the last at-bid spot, head-to-head matters. And it finally came down to the point where they had to just bow down and, yep, the U is getting in. And Notre Dame got to go to the crib. And, you know, Freeman and Beijing got to go, you know, maybe go to MetLife and talk to the Maras and the Youngs. Because that's a real thing that's happening. I think it will be a horrible move if Freeman goes to the Giants. But, you know, to each his own. But, yeah, when you're talking about how was this able to get off? How was Notre Dame able to get this off? It's all about clout. And if you've built up a rep and you've built up a brand that matters outside, like I can tell you growing up in New York, you don't really have an affinity for any college team unless you have family legacies and stuff like that. But me being able to turn on Channel 4 every Saturday and watch Notre Dame football, that just inherently became my team because they were always on. So you have that brand, that's 30 years ago. And they're still one of them. Independent. They were independent then 30 years ago, and they still be able to get a local major broadcasting company to broadcast all day games. That's real power. That's something that not even an SEC school could pull off. I don't know if you put, maybe Bama. Bama might be, but I don't know. If Bama could strike a deal, if you're CBS, would you want to become the exclusive home of Alabama Crimson Tide football, where you're broadcasting all their games every single week, regardless, across all your local affiliates? I don't know if you could get that off in the same way like how Notre Dame did back in the day 30 years ago and still now to this day. Corey in the chat, Randy Moss said the same thing. At some point, real recognize real, right? Like, when it comes to, like, imagine, take Randy Moss, right? Randy Moss went to Notre Dame. Randy Moss went to Florida State. Randy Moss got ran out of both those places. So Randy Moss had to land at Marshall. Can you imagine Notre Dame with Randy Moss on Channel 4 or whatever your local NBC affiliate was back in the day? Every Saturday, you're just watching Randy Moss cook. Like, do you know the type of leverage that is in terms of a bro? We have a Heisman finalist every Saturday for the free ski. Like, can you imagine? Like, that's real leverage. That's broadcasting rights. That's why NBC has stayed a partner with that university, because it speaks for itself. It has paid off. It's a brand. It's a brand so much so that it can live outside of the Power 4 or 5 structure and still be right there. They could still go get top 10 recruits. They could still be active in the portal. They could still play NIL games. Notre Dame has had no hit being independent. No statement going in terms of Alabama being on local TV. Yeah. Saban didn't run from the grind. Yeah, he ran for the grind of NIL. That's for sure. And I think a lot of these coaches are really understanding that the leverage is not theirs anymore. The leverage of college sports, specifically in basketball and football, are no longer in the coach's hands. In most cases, there's still some cases where legacy coaches matter to a certain level, to a certain degree, right? But for the most part, it's about the bag. I mean, it's always been about the bag under the table, but now it's on the table. And let's still be clear, NIL money is not universities paying players. These players are still not being paid by universities. They're being paid via boosters, via endorsements with their name, image, and likeness. They're not getting W-2s being cut by the university. So much as people like to say, oh, this is bastardized college sports and amateurism, which was always shamateurism, but the notion of amateurism has long been gone, or is gone now. It's long been gone. I mean, Eric Dickerson's talking about, Mustangs being left at the crib. That's in the 80s. We know brown paper bags have been dropped off for numerous athletes across numerous sports, by the way. If you think it's just basketball and football, you're insane. Baseball, same. Hockey, same. Gymnastics, track, there's always bags being dropped off. It's always been incentivized to curry the favor of the best of the best. And it's only been the NCAA that has tried to act as though that was never happening, that was never a thing. Even though there's been so many movies, from Blue Chips to The Program to documentaries, Hoop Dreams, it's always been front and center. It's always been laid out right in front of everyone. But the NCAA has always looked the other way to act like it's not happening, even though it was hiding in plain sight. Hit the chat, Steph in the chat. Do you think there should be regulations to NIL, transfer portal, or both? None. Let it continue to be the wild, wild west, because this is only the beginning. Once I think they get to that Power 1, then you might want to put some stuff in place, because that's the final form. I think now it's evolving to where we're not at the Power 1 phase yet. We're moving away from the NCAA yet. So we want to kind of let the market dictate itself. You're seeing things now where it was just a little bit of money. Now we're getting into where dudes are getting millions, and it was just straight cash up front. And now you're getting deals where it's dictated on how long you stay. Now there's being provisions being put into these NIL deals. So I don't think there should be regulations now, because the market is kind of working itself out. Let it be what it is. It's free agency. You're year to year with this shit. It's not one with an option. It's not two with an option. It's year to year. Let it be what it is. I've always tried to be the champion of this. The NCAA, college sports, has been professionalized. It's been professionalized. This is nothing new. So if that's the case, then let it be what it is. It is free agency. and let it be an open market just like how it is in sports. Now, if you want to sign a contract that ties you to that university and you're getting paid by that university, not being sponsored by a Chevy dealership that's led by a booster of that university, being paid directly by the AD, it's coming out the treasury of the university. Then we could talk about long-term contracts where you get to lock players in. Like the kid from Michigan, Underwood, they're saying he's watching the situation closely because he essentially has, allegedly, 4 one-year deals in his NIL deal. Like if he doesn't like what's happening at Michigan with the interim guy in terms of the long-term planning, he could skate. So like if it becomes like that where that's the norm, and again, you get paid by the university. Underwood should be getting a check. He should be getting a W-2 sent by the University of Michigan out of Ann Arbor. Not some Ford dealership. Not no Wrangler sponsorship from when Harbaugh was there. None of that. None of that. It should be a straight up check cut by the University of Michigan. When we get to that point, and it's a Power One, then I think we can talk about regulations and unionizing, getting a CBA. You got to do all the things. And I think that's what these universities are scared of, because once you go there, you can't go back. You can't repeal CBAs. Now, you can circumvent it like the point fraud, but you can't repeal. So now once you get to that point of where you have a CBA, a union, and athletes are getting paid by universities, there's no going back. And that's what these ADs, these university presidents, are scared to death about. And low-key, these coaches. Because just like you as a player in a professional ranks can get a coach fired if you have enough status and clout, that will then start to happen at the college level, and you can low-key say some of that has already happened. But it will for sure happen once that step is taken, once they get unionized, once they get a collective bargaining agreement, and once they start getting W-2s straight from the universities. Once that happens, it's a wrap. NCAA will be more of a laughing stock than what it is right now. It will cease to exist. All right, I appreciate those for pulling up. Appreciate the likes, those of you hitting the like button. Let's see what else we got here in the chat. Corey wants me to talk about the Bears. Of course he does. All right. We'll talk about the Bears in a second. If anyone has any sports media questions, drop them below. Talk about the Bears. So, with the Chicago Bears, and I did a pod, didn't release it because it wasn't timely. It got quickly outdated. But so I'll refresh some of that and add on some stuff from this past weekend. So the Bears are going to beat the teams that they're now supposed to beat. The Bears have had enough things cleaned up on both sides of the ball where now they can beat teams that they're supposed to beat on paper. They had Shador and all the stuff come into Soldier Field, and they took care of business, and they blew them out. Now, the score will make you think it was a traditional blowout. It was not. If the Browns had more athletes, had better execution, actual high-level skill players, that game could have been a lot closer. That game was a blowout as we got into the second half. That first half, it was still only 14-0, I think, going into the half or something to that effect. So the Chicago Bears are a franchise that are a poverty franchise, a franchise mired in poverty, whether it's from the front office, whether it was ownership, whether it was underachieving players. And that includes coaching. Now they have a coach who has learned what his team is and what it isn't. Early in the season, Ben Johnson thought he could hand the keys to Caleb Williams and let him cook. I think it was after week 3 is when Ben Johnson learned, I can't give the keys to Caleb yet. Maybe it'll happen next year. Well, he'll give him full autonomy, and Caleb he'll have the reins taken off. But you can markedly see that the Bears have decided not necessarily to hide Caleb Williams, but they have not just given the keys to Caleb Williams. Ben Johnson tried early in the season because there was games where the Bears would not run the ball at all in the second half. Multiple games where there were little to no attempts to run the ball in this whole second half of a football game. Now you see the Bears, they're one of the best running teams in the league now because Ben Johnson realized I cannot hand the keys to Caleb, whether it's Caleb related, which is part of it, or whether it's we don't have the skill position players like I thought. Sorry, DJ Moore is a number one by default for this roster. He's not a true number one by league standards. He's a number one for the Bears. He's not a number one on a good team. He's a number two. But for the Bears, he's a clear-cut number one. Problem is that I think the best receiver on the team is their third receiver, Luther Borden. And with him battling injuries and Rome Odunze's pops keep tweeting away about how his son's not getting enough targets, that Bears receiver room is not that impressive. When Zacchaeus is your gadget guy, you're in a bad spot. The gadget guy for the Lions was J-Mo. And therein lies the difference. When you're going from J-Mo to Zacchaeus, there's a drop-off. You know, when you're going from Laporta to the combination of Cole Kmet and Loveland, it's a drop-off. When you're going from Amon-Ra St. Brown to DJ Moore, there's a drop-off, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we could go from, you know, Sonic and Knuckles, Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery to, you know, what the Bears have, it's a drop-off. But the Bears focused on the interior line in the offseason. They spent bread. They traded away draft capital to make the interior of their offensive line better. And they finally trusted in that offensive line and let them do what they were paid to do. And they have a running game now. Now, the running game wasn't bad last year or even the year before that. It just hasn't been good. It hasn't been dependable. It hasn't been consistent because the offensive line, in addition to the play calling, in addition to the execution, wasn't there. Now you're adding in at least consistency and better play calling and scheming. Now you have actual talented guys running the scheme. Things are starting to play out the way that they should. So the Bears are able to beat teams that they're supposed to. The problem is, when they faced the Packers a couple of weeks ago, I could have told you that that game was going to go that way before it was played. Now, they play the Packers again this Sunday in Chicago. It might be a little different because no Micah Parsons, right? But it really doesn't matter. As long as you see that other side, as long as you see that uniform on the other side, if you're a Chicago Bear, that's been the thing. I had the stat when I did that recording. Every decade, from the 90s to now, the Packers have dominated the matchup between the Bears and the Packers. And it's not even like, oh, it's close. No. It was complete blowouts. We're talking the last 30 years, the last decade where the Bears have beat the Packers, the last decade where the Bears have won that matchup was the 80s. 30, 40 years ago, bro. So when, you know, the Bears always become good and then they always have to face the Packers, and I have people that try to reach out to me, it's like, hey, man, the Bears are looking good. I'm like, dog, they got to go through Green Bay. We know how that's going to end. Like, I've seen that movie too much in my life. You're not going to fool me. You're not going to gas me up. But the Bears are in a spot where now they're expected to beat the teams that they should, as opposed to years past where they will always find a way to drop a game like that. Like that Browns game would have been a game in the past where the Bears would have dropped that game. Now again, the Bears defense is perceived to be good. It's not. And even during the broadcast against the Browns, they were trying to like temper expectations because the data is right there for you to see where the Bears offense is markedly better than last year across the board. The Bears defense is just way more opportunistic. They create turnovers. But you know what the problem with having a defense that is their linchpin or their calling card is creating a lot of turnovers, you can't recreate that year to year. The Bears create a lot of turnovers and they give up a lot of big plays. That's not the markings of a good defense. That's the markings of a ball hawking, risk averse defense. And that's what you have in Chicago. The Bears are living and dying by, are we creating turnovers or not? That's their defensive philosophy, because the pass rush comes and goes. Sometimes Sweat is getting off the edge and he's doing work, and sometimes you kind of forget he's there. So the defensive line is in flux. The linebackers, they got some vets. Edwards has come back. He's trying to be okay. The secondary, it's amazing that the secondary has been so advantageous, because they've been without Jalen Johnson, and they've had a lot of banged up bodies coming in and out of that lineup, to where they had to dust off CGJ and get him in there. So I think to assume the Bears are good now is more of a belief in the offense than it is the defense, because the defense you can't recreate. You can't just assume next year they're going to be able to create all these turnovers. Now, you can assume they're going to keep giving them all them big plays, because that's not a happenstance. It's not like these are all broken plays, like guys are unfamiliar with the scheme. This is just dudes being beat for big plays. So while you can give them a little bit of credit because they are creating those turnovers, these turnovers are not just all tip passes or, wrong reads by the QB. Sometimes they are jumping into the passing lane. Sometimes they are peanut punching or just helmet on the ball, things of that nature. But you can't just assume that that's going to happen year after year. So I think that's where, to me, it's a little bit of a fool's gold type of deal, because I can't assume the Bears defense is fixed, because every year they're going to cause hella turnovers. But based on what I have seen, I can't say they're going to give up hella big plays. I mean, they made Shedeur look like he had a strong arm. Isaiah Bond was getting open deep. They made Shedeur look like he had a gun. So you're not going to tell me that defense is fixed when they're making Shedeur, who we all can agree on has an okay arm. Not a great arm, not a fantastic arm, accurate arm, but not a deep. He doesn't have a cannon. We can all agree to that, right? Shedeur does not have a cannon. Yet somehow the Bears defense gave up 2 bombs to Isaiah Bond. Steph in the chat. Back to sports media. Do you think that the rise of social media and 15 seconds of fame led to the dilution of real journalism? Oh, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Without a doubt, bro. Without a doubt. Social media allowed for more voices to be heard, right? But to be heard, you had to separate yourself from the masses. You had the algorithm had to recognize that you were doing something that allowed folk to jump in and engage. So social media the algorithm rewards clicks, it rewards comments, it rewards likes, shares, reposts, whatever it is, right? So people started to learn, well, how do I get that? I want that currency. I want that reward of going viral. How do you go viral? And people started paying attention to, oh, you have to rage bait, or you have to clickbait, or you have to just be loud. Loud seems to be a thing. That's how you have Fraud A. Smith, who has gone to the top of the industry because yelling and screaming. I remember when he jumped on the scene and he was talking about Slava Medvedenko from the Lakers back in the day. That was his thing of, oh, who's this young black dude that's, talking greasy about the Lakers backup power forward, and going on long rants about the ineptness of Slava Medvedenko. That's really how Joe Budden had the Drake Views moment. That was when his pod and his personality really got jumped out there to the masses. You could argue Fraud A. Smith's foray in that same lane was going crazy on Slava Medvedenko. How do you compete with that? People started taking to the Twitter streets or to the IG streets and started trying to emulate it. Copy and paste. This is a copycat industry where someone sees something that works. Well, how can I do that same thing, but tweak it just a little bit to call it my own? I mean, when you literally have MySpace admitting that they just copied Black People Meet, or Black Planet. Like that's what we're talking about. So if someone is getting on the worldwide leader yelling into a camera about the Lakers backup power forward and getting clicks and gigs and shows off of stuff like that, then guess what the masses are going to do? Guess what the people who want to be where he's at are going to do? They're going to do the same thing. They're going to go and say, all right, I know Stephen A. was at the Philadelphia Inquirer and bounced around and did media gigs, was a columnist and all that stuff. Forget that. I'm just going to look into a camera and go crazy on the backup power forward of my team. And that's where that's part of the reason of how we got here. Part of the reason of how we got here is because the virality was rewarded, the lazy hot take. There are such a thing as a lazy hot take, where you say the obvious thing, but you say it in a way that's exaggerated because it's a lazy take and you need people to pay attention to your take. So you go over the board in delivering the take. But the words itself are lazy because it's a lazy, obvious take. That's what he has mastered. He has mastered it's a lazy take to kill the Cowboys. It's a lazy take. But that's why you have to do the theatrics. That's why I got to put on the cowboy hat. That's why you got to strut. That's why I got to do all that stuff, because it's a lazy take to kill a popular franchise. It's easy to go at the Yankees. It's easy. Like I could tell you from working in the tri-state area, working at, top spots within the tri-state area, it's easy to go at the Yankees. You want to get easy numbers, easy ratings, turn on the mic, kill the Yankees, and watch the phone lines light up with Yankee fans either agreeing or disagreeing with you. You could do a 4-5 hour show. I've seen it. I've produced it where the host has nothing. The host will literally come in and say, I don't know what we're going to talk about today. And you try to throw different topics out there, stuff that's kind of bubbling up, but not, mainline, frontline stories. And they just decide, you know what? I'm going to just kill the Yankees today and watch the board light up. And they would go on air and in their opening monologue, kill the Yankees. And then I would turn to my left, look at my phone board, and it would be just call after call after call coming in. I can't believe he said the Yankees stuck. He don't know what he's talking about. I got to talk to him. Put him on hold. I agree with him. The Yankees do suck. I agree with. Put him on hold. And then for the next 4 or 5 hours, that's the show. Your man's Shannon Sharp was out here wearing the goat mask, the black and miles, and the Henny. Why do you think he had to put all that out there? Just because he was saying LeBron's really good. That was his take. LeBron is really good. LeBron's his GOAT. That's a lazy hot take. So how do you season it? How do you put some Sazon on it? How do you put some adobo on it? By wearing a goat mask, pouring out Henny, and smoking black and milds. That's how you get people to pay attention to the lazy take of, I think LeBron James is really good. Nick Wright is doing it the same way. Now, he doesn't have to wear the GOAT mask to do black and miles, but his whole thing is LeBron's better than Jordan. So I'm going to find every negative stat I can find about Michael Jordan when it's compared to LeBron James. I'm going to have all those at the ready. Because my take is LeBron is better than Jordan. That's his hot take. It's a lazy take. Even though I disagree with that take, it doesn't cause me any emotions because I'm like, who is this dude? But because where we're at now in sports media, where that is now considered a fact, a person that is hired and put on television and talking into a camera, anything they say is considered fact. Even though we don't need to know about the credibility, the background, the awareness, the knowledge, the skill set of the person given the take, they're put on TV, we assume they know what they're talking about. And that was birthed because of that's what it used to be. But it's no longer that. It's just, this person has an engaging personality, or this person has X amount of followers online. So let's put them on. They have a platform. You used to be able to, in the rare cases, be able to build and learn on the job. That's no longer the case. You now build and learn on social media, doing your own thing. And then if you're fortunate enough or have the right connections or are a Nepo baby, you're then pushed and jumped up over a whole bunch of other folk into those traditional platforms. That's where the game is, unfortunately. Step for the chat. I took a journalism class at Auburn that required us to get a story off in 80 characters. Woo! 80 characters. That is nasty, bro. God damn. Damn, 80 characters? That's not even a story, bro. That's just that used to be your opening blurb. That's your hook. God damn. Yeah, that right there might be a linchpin moment. Like, that right there is that's wild to me. 80 characters. That's essentially tell a whole story in a tweet. And that's the thing. It's like, is our attention spans being waned down to the point where that now is the norm? I can understand for the youngins. But for those of us who are at least 25 and up, do you really need a whole story to be told to you in that short of amount of time? I mean, there's podcasts that are hours long. What is it about that makes people listen to that as opposed to a reading or even audiobooking a story? Because now it's gotten to the point where these news organizations know people don't want to read. They now have the AI voice dictation built into the news article, but you don't even have to read the article. You can listen to the article like it's a podcast. So is that the evolution where you can write 3,000 words, but no one's going to read it? They're just going to listen to it? Is that a workaround? Man, that's nasty, bro. Getting the whole story off in 80 words, 80 characters. That's 80 letters and spaces and punctuation. Nasty. That is, if that would have been the case for me when I was taking journalism classes, I don't know if I could have done it. I mean, that's why you have AI everywhere. Because how are you supposed to do a real story in 80 characters? That's why you have ChatGPT do it, or Claude do it, or whoever. You just have them do it. Because how am I expected to know how to do that? And that's why I'm fearful for where the game goes from here when it comes to sports media, because the evolution of this doesn't look good. There's no positive evolution to this. If long form is out, except for podcasts that are driven by athletes who don't have the acumen or the reporting know-how to know how. Imagine if a athlete pod, let's just say All the Smoke. Let's say All the Smoke was given the tea of the Kawhi Leonard stuff with the Clippers. What do you think they would have did with that story? I mean, Pablo Torres told you it took him 7 months just to unearth everything and to line everything up and to cross-reference and all. What do you think All the Smoke would have done? What do you think Knuckleheads would have done? What do you think Jeff Teague and them would have done? Or Gil and them would have done if somebody would have plugged them in and said, hey, yo, you should check on Kawhi and the Clippers and circumventing the salary cap? Do you think any of them would have given it even more than one brief mention on a pod? And I think that's the problem, because people are getting their information from athlete-driven platforms. And they just don't have the skill set. It is what it is. Just like they could call us casuals or people that y'all should not listen to people like myself and people like y'all who want to get into this media landscape because we didn't play at their level. I can say the same thing for them. Well, you can't be a reporter. You can't be giving commentary on a game because you've never commentated before. There's levels to commentating. We've seen it. Emmitt Smith's one of the greatest running backs of all time. He was horrible as an analyst. But because he was Emmitt Smith and he was a Cowboy, he got every chance in the world to do takes. And he was trash. Jerry Rice might be the greatest football player to ever play. And he was trash as a commentator. And the networks realized it and they phased them out. Shannon Sharpe bounced around a few networks before he landed on his own and finally figured it out by doing lazy hot takes. It wasn't even that his analysis got better. He just started doing lazy hot takes because when he was just giving straight football analysis, it was mid. He had some moments when it was him and Prime on NFL Network just because of the camaraderie between the two of them, but just straight football commentating, football analysis, it was mid. So we can turn that on them. But unfortunately, because it's so much easier to buy podcast equipment, it's so much easier to buy a camera and to jump online and turn the stream on, and they have built-in fan bases or built-in clout that will curry an audience easier and faster, that's where the game is. That's why Gil is allowing Underdog to use him, because he knows no matter where I go, I'm going to bring a certain amount of audience with me because I'm an athlete and I'm popular and I do numbers. He is willing to put himself in a 360 because he feels as though no matter where I go, I could bring an audience. Now, to me, those two things don't make sense, but he has made that so in his head, so to each his own. But that's where the game is going. Where the same credibility where you shouldn't be able to talk ball if you haven't played ball. Well, you shouldn't be able to talk if you've never talked. Steph in the chat. It's not a shock that Mina Kimes is better at breaking down the game, better than a lot of athletes on TV today. And that's fact. And she's a business reporter. She was a financial business reporter. And because she goes in the lab, studies the same tape, researches, does the background information, she can go and run laps around Dan Orlovsky on a daily basis. She could go toe-to-toe with Dominique Foxworth because she's done the work. She was a financial business reporter and left that industry to talk ball and is one of the best at it because the skill set of you need to research this before you go somewhere and talk or write about it was already there. So whether it's writing about doing a profile on a Fortune 500 CEO, or whether it's breaking down why a cover 3 is ineffective compared to a cover 4, she already has the skill set of knowing how to do the research necessary to talk about whatever she's going to be on a platform talking or writing about. And that's where the athletes fall short. They just know what they know, but how do they convey it? That's really what it comes down to. Are you going to do the research? Or are you at least going to hire the people behind the scenes to do the research? Because I could talk about that. I've been one of those guys that have had to go and do the research to make the host. That's part of a producer's job, is to do the research to make your host look good. Your job is to make your host look good. If they don't know something and they are stalling, that stalling is because they're waiting for their producers to look up the information and to feed it to them in their ear. That's how that works. Like, that's the job. So if you don't know it, Somebody in your camp better know it, or better at least know how to go look it up. But we've seen too many times where that's clearly not the case, where Colin Cowherd oftentimes gets called out for just saying the wrong thing, just not having the accurate information. And you can misspeak. That happens. It happens to anyone who talks a lot. But with them, it's, no, you're just flat out wrong. It's just not accurate. And there's no one there to pull your card and be like, hey, you might want to go back and clean that up. And there's no, and let's be real, is there even a reward for cleaning it up? Freezing cold takes exists for a reason on social media. I don't know. I yearn for the days of when sports media was a real thing. It was a thing that I got into this game for. It's a thing that made me want to become who I ultimately have become in this game. It got me involved in sports media. It's gotten me to cover a Super Bowl, cover a Final Four, be a part of NBA Finals. It's gotten me to do a lot of things. But the way it's going now, and the way that it ominously seems to be trending towards, I think it's a dying industry, if it's not already dead already. I'll fight the good fight until the end of it, but I think, unfortunately, when Pablo Torre becomes the man of the year, or the sports personality, or the sports media reporter of the year, just because he's actually just still doing reporting that no one else is clearly doing, I think it's problematic. I mean, there's still some people out here doing it. Jeff Pearlman is still out here doing it. He just wrote a Tupac book, but he is still engaged heavily into sports and sports reporting and storytelling. Seth Wickersham for the Four Letter Network, Don Van Natta for the Four Letter Network. Like, there's still some people out here doing the work. The problem is just like the masses that are on social media, that are consuming content via their cell phones, by and large don't care. They've been made to not care because the industry has allowed it to go that way. Can it come back? It's going to take a shift. I think there could be a shift towards independent media. I think independent media companies could be a thing, because you're going to have your big 4 or 5, and then if you start adding in the streaming platforms, maybe 6. But with that, then you have that underbelly. You know, with your pop rap, your mainstream rap, your trap rap, you still have underground rap, right? Where is underground sports media? Where does that live? Is that places like YouTube here? Is it other platforms? You see platforms keep bubbling up. Like, what was it? The Playback one? The Playback company just dissolved, or they're going to reassess how they're doing it. It's because it was good for when it was just underground, but then eventually you want to start making money as a company, and that means you got to make deals. And because their whole platform was based off of taking copyrighted footage and live streaming it, you can't make no real money, because you're not going to have deals with leagues and league partners when you're bootlegging their content on live streaming for your own benefit. So Playback is now having to reassess their business model, and they're probably going to come back and make deals with leagues, because that's the only way you could play that game. So get down or lay down. Sports media right now, as we know it, is dying a slow death. From sports radio to sports journalism to sports investigative reporting to even the content game itself, it's a dying industry. I go by the name of DCMD. I am a 16-year sports media veteran. I've worked at major streaming companies, major broadcast companies, and major sports cable companies. So I try to use this channel, use this platform to give my analysis, my feedback, my stories, and just give you my insight. If you like that type of content, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on your way out. We'll try to do streams like this more often. So if you want to be a part of that, turn the bell on for notifications. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you soon. Peace.